Hello everyone and welcome to this new video. I finally made a tier list of the infantry rifles of World War II. Let it be clear, first of all, there are two things to keep in mind when making this list. The first is that this is a fairly decontextualized list. That is, it's my personal opinion. Regarding the use of the individual weapon itself, things like logistics, production and so on are not taken into account, for example. Honestly, I don't like the Mauser much, but it helped win the war and was easy to produce. So we're not evaluating the weapons for their impact in the war, but exclusively as individual items. The second point I need to make is that I had to exclude a lot of weapons from this list. I had to do a very long pre-selection. First of all, I excluded all those weapons that are essentially prototypes and things that were rarely used. I also excluded weapons that are not infantry rifles, such as submachine guns or light machine guns. And I'm only considering the standard infantry weapon. One last note. I also had to leave out variants of the same weapon. For example, we have the Mauser K98 on the list, but there were many Mausers. Polish Mausers, Belgian Mausers, Swedish Mausers given to Finland. So many different weapons, but they're very similar. I left them out of this list, otherwise I would have 100 different weapons to talk about. Alright, but let's get straight to the point. The first one we have is the Sturmgewehr 44. I've talked a lot about the Sturmgewehr 44. It's an excellent, highly modern weapon in both ergonomics and concept, and it remains far from obsolete today. Could I show you an STG? Equipping all the infantry with it in 2020 probably wouldn't make the slightest difference. If you haven't seen my video about it, definitely go check it out. The SG-44 goes in the highest category of all, category A. Next is the WS-36, a little known weapon that preceded the Samozaryadnaya Vintovka Tokarev 40. Here I want to make another very important digression. The WS-36 is not a great weapon. It's a weapon that has problems. Ergonomically it's okay, but internally it's not one of the best. It was an attempt to create something between a battle rifle and an automatic weapon, a sort of light machine gun. Kind of like what the Americans did with the Browning automatic rifle. Many of you may recognize these weapons from video games, but games don't show how things really are. In my opinion and others, a semi-automatic or automatic weapon, so a self-loading weapon, is on a whole different level compared to any other. Bolt action. There's a fundamental difference in the weapon's capabilities, whether it's semi-automatic or bolt action. And even a poor semi-automatic, in some ways, in many fundamental ways when it comes to use, is better than a good bolt action. No matter how much training you have, you'll never be able to use a bolt action better than a semi-automatic. The semi-automatic is truly on a whole other level. It's not just a bit better than bolt actions, it's a step above. So in this list, you'll never see a bolt action ranked above a semi-automatic, because there's a fundamental and key difference, and we want to explain that to you. That said, the WS-36 is not a good semi-automatic. So it's better than the Mauser, probably, which the Russians used, so it falls into category C. It's probably not the best, but still it's not a bolt action. And that's the important difference. Next is the Risaka Type 99. The Japanese used different models, and again, for simplicity, they mixed both the old Type 38s with the Type 99S, which are in a different caliber. The quality of the Type 99 decreases as the war goes on. They tried to simplify production a bit, especially for components like the wood. However, the action remains extremely solid and works very well. It's a Mauser action, or I would even dare say improved, and as such, it's truly excellent. Bolt action in use, but it's still a bolt action. And in my subjective list, as always, it goes in category D, the highest that any bolt action can aspire to. For the simple reason that its use is a magnitude below that of any semi-automatic. Then we have the Carcano. The Carcano is a weapon that is on one hand underrated. It's not particularly complicated, it's not an excellent weapon. Here as well the army will use two versions. The old rifle from the First World War and the 38A modernized weapon in another caliber, definitely better than the old one. 6.5. Still, I don't really like clips, Mannlicher. The weapon is simple. It's not among the best, but it's not the worst either. The Carcano 38 corrects some of the flaws that the Carcano 91 has. Anyway, I have to group them in the same category. No, it's not the worst, but it's not the best. It goes into category E. We have a weapon that few people know about, the G41 by Mauser. You should know that there are two G41S. They haven't even heard of the G41. They know the more famous G43, the G41. It was the first real attempt by the German army to adopt a semi-automatic. There were two designs that entered this competition, and both were produced. The Mauser one less so, also because it was the worst weapon. The Mauser 41 is excessively complicated. I recommend you watch the video by Forgotten Weapons. Unfortunately, I don't have one to show you right now. You'll see how complicated it is, Katesa. And despite everything, if kept clean and well maintained, it can be a good weapon. And it's still a semi-automatic. That's why it falls into the same category as the WS-36, meaning semi-automatics that have problems, but they're still semi-automatics. So, category C, the M1 Garand, the very famous M1 Garand, the Americans were the only ones who managed to equip practically their entire army with a semi-automatic. They also still used the Springfield. In any case, the M1 Garand is the first one there is. The M1 is a good weapon. I mean, it's a good weapon. It's not a bad one. Today, the M1 Garand is obsolete. The M1 Garand is obsolete. The M1 Garand kind of marks the end of the development of a certain concept. After the M1 comes the M14, and it's not a good weapon. It was a good one at the end of the 1930s. So it won't have the same technical and conceptual evolution that the Sturmgewehr will have. However, in the context of World War II, it was an extremely advanced weapon, very reliable for its time. And it was one more thing that American infantry had compared to their opponents. The M1 Garand goes in category A. The Enfield number 4. I love Enfields. They're my favorite bolt-action rifles, though for some reason one has never appeared on the channel. Why haven't I found one in Poland? They're quite rare here. It has great ergonomics and great sights. In my practical list, it's probably my favorite action on this list. It's not my absolute favorite, but why is it the absolute favorite? I didn't put it on this list for various reasons. It was never really used in World War II. It was a second-line weapon. I'm talking about the P14 and the P17. It was a World War I weapon. Anyway, it's a bolt action. Even though it's excellent, I feel like putting it in category D. Many forget that China played a fundamental role, even if we don't think of it as a belligerent in World War II. Because it wasn't part of the Allies nor of any faction, but even before 1939 it was fighting against Japan. And most of the Japanese forces in World War II were not engaged in fighting the Americans, but the Chinese. So the Chinese effort, the millions of victims the Chinese suffered, were fundamental in containing Japanese expansion. So I felt like including what was basically their most widespread rifle, the Hanyang 88, which was a copy of the German Gewehr 88. Be careful, it's not Mauser 88, there's no such thing. It's the Gewehr 88. The Gewehr 88 still belongs to that first generation of military bolt-action rifles using black powder. It was a direct response to the French rifles, so it's not perfect. It's a weapon that personally fascinates me. I would really love to have a Gewehr 88 or a Hanyang 88 because I like strange things and those that don't work as well as they should. That said, it's not a good weapon. It's a weapon that was indeed produced in the millions by the Chinese and was widely used, but it has quite a few flaws that weapons from later generations corrected. So I put it in category F. It's not a good weapon. Here we are with the Samozaryadnaya Vintovka Tokareva. 40 very famous, we all know it. It's a good battle rifle, ergonomic, with a detachable 10-round magazine. It has some accuracy issues with vertical dispersion. It's not an excellent marksman weapon. In fact, many were equipped with a scope, but many even preferred the Mosin. Despite this, in my opinion, it was a good attempt to try to introduce a semi-automatic weapon to the infantry. It's pleasant to use. If you get the chance, shoot it. It's a good weapon overall. However, it's not the sure revealer. In the M1 Garand, it falls into category B. Excellent weapons, but not perfect. Here, I mentioned the 2 G41 and now the G41 by Walter, which was better than Mauser's G41 and very similar to the G43. The guys from Inner Range simply show how the G43 is an evolution of the G41. But they're so similar that you can take the bolt carrier group from the G41 and put it on the G43, and it still works. The weapon is that similar. The main difference between the G41 Walter and G43 is the G41's less reliable gas system. It's the so-called Bang system, or Bang, which isn't an onomatopoeia but a surname. The Danish one, so if anyone speaks Danish, could you tell me how to correctly pronounce this surname? The so-called gas trap system is not the best idea in the world. It lacks a removable magazine and is loaded with stripper clips. It's better than the Mauser G41, but it still has some issues. So I'm undecided whether to put it in category B or C, but I don't think so. It's comparable to the SWT40 and closer to the Mauser G41, so it falls into category C. Next is a rifle often overlooked but crucial, especially during World War I. In the Second World War, it had several secondary roles, such as garrison troops, police units, and occupation divisions. It was also used by many of the Allies, Nazi Germany, and especially the Hungarians, since it was a rifle that came from the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The Germans took many of them with the Anschluss of Austria, and the Hungarians also had quite a few. It's the Mannlicher 1895. It's a weapon that was already getting a bit old for the Second World War. It's a straight pull. I'm not really a fan of straight pull rifles. By the way, just to be clear, I didn't include another very famous weapon from that time, which is an excellent rifle, the Schmidt-Rubin. The Swiss K31, I didn't include it because it didn't take part in the war. So why should I have included the K31? Just a side note, there are many other weapons from that era that also didn't take part in the war. Just to make a list. Instead, I want to talk specifically about the weapons that actually saw combat in significant numbers. In this regard, the Mannlicher uses an old cartridge, and using Mannlicher clips, which I personally don't like, isn't ideal. It's not a bad weapon though. It's in the same category as the Carcano, they're basically equivalent in use, so category E. Then we have the K98. Of course, there's already a video on the channel about the K98 and its predecessor, the Gewehr 1898. Good bolt action. In general, I don't love it as much as the Lee-Enfield, but I still consider it an excellent bolt action. It goes into category D. If you want to know more in depth what I think about it, I invite you to watch that video. Then we have the short magazine Lee-Enfield, or the Smelly, as we can call it. It was the standard rifle of the Commonwealth in World War I. The British then switched to the Lee-Enfield No. 4, but not the Commonwealth nations like Australia and New Zealand. They continued to use slightly modernized versions of the short magazine. Lee-Enfield, a good bolt-action rifle, not as perfect as the Lee-Enfield No. 4, but I would still put it in this category of the best bolt-action rifles. Here's the MAS-36. With the MAS-36, I have to admit I don't have that much experience. Premise: it wasn't supposed to be the standard infantry rifle. The French wanted to arm everyone with semi-automatic rifles. Although the MAS-36 was intended for secondary troops behind the front lines, that wasn't how it was actually used. You must also view the MAS-36's design as that of a second-line weapon. It's not ideal, it's not perfect, it doesn't have excellent qualities, but it doesn't have any major flaws either. The action is solid, yes. As for the rest, there are some questionable aspects in its use. I don't know it well. I've only handled it, and honestly, I'd like to shoot it. My opinion might change if I do. But for now, it falls into category E. It's not the best bolt action I've ever seen or handled, but it's not the worst either. Then we have the Springfield M1903. The Springfield is an American-style copy of the Mauser. Being a Mauser, it's an excellent rifle. Like the Risaka, without going into too much detail, it falls into category D. The good bolt actions. When we get to World War II, most of the slightly worse bolt actions, which we saw a lot of, maybe in World War I, have already been weeded out. Only the best remain, with a notable exception that we will get to soon. G43. The G43 fixes a lot of the problems of the G41, Walther. Even though it's not perfect, in particular, the gas system gives too much gas to the piston, and over time, it breaks. If you're lucky enough to have a G43 or you want to buy a real G43, you need to check that the gas system has been modified. Let's say post-war, because otherwise you risk it breaking in your hands, exploding in your face. I'm serious, that's how it is. Other than that, it's a decent weapon. I would put it in the same category as the SWT, 40 good semi-automatic weapons, but not perfect. FG42. I'm also a bit conflicted about the FG42. I've never fired it, I've only handled it. It was a good weapon, but on the other hand, it seems a bit like a dead end to me. As for its configuration, this strange setup that we could call a sort of bullpup, but not exactly. Strangely enough, many people don't know this, but the American M60 is very similar to the FG42. The machine gun, was definitely a weapon that succeeded in doing what it was supposed to do, which was to equip paratroopers and give them more firepower. And in this it excels. A 20-round magazine, which no one except the Sturmgewehr had, made it possible to be a light machine gun. Fantastic. A bit heavy, a bit imperfect in some ways, especially when it comes to ergonomics. I feel a bit between category A and B, but I'll give it category A, because it's definitely a weapon far superior to the G43 and the Samozaryadnaya Vintovka Tokareva 40. Maybe I wouldn't choose it if I had the option to pick the M1 Garand or the Sturmgewehr 44. I would take those instead of the FG42, but still, it's better than the G43 and the Samozaryadnaya Vintovka Tokareva 40. So, it falls into the category of excellent weapons, with a small question mark next to it. At the end, there's the Mosin. The Mosin is what do you think? Where does it end up? Category F. If you want to know more, watch my video about the Mosin. I can't waste any more words talking about the Mosin. Thank you for watching this video. Let me know what you think. Let it be clear, this is my own personal category. As you can see, for me, no bolt-action rifle is better than a semi-automatic. Especially you shooters, because if I hear opinions from gamers, I get pissed off. Tell me, what do you think if you believe that any semi-automatic is better than a bolt-action? Well, what can I say? See you next time.